Hi, I'm Kaley.
And I'm Jessica, and welcome to today's Top 5 list.
As always, this is a list of places that we personally would like to visit in the randomly chosen state of
All right. This one is Texas.
Number 5 is the Victoria's Black Swan Inn.
Built in 1867 on the historic site of the 1842 Battle of Salado, Victoria's Black Swan Inn has been a home to some of the most prestigious people in San Antonio's history. It's an elegant two-story Greek Revival-style plantation home.
The house sits on a grassy knoll overlooking the Salado Creek in San Antonio. Steeped in tradition and lore, Victoria's Black Swan Inn is the most hauntingly romantic location for your wedding or other social gathering.
Behind the beauty of this historic inn is a truly interesting history. From before 5000 BC to around 1000 AD, the area was the site of Native American encampments. Artifacts from this time can still be found here.
Archaeologists have provided evidence showing that Native Americans once lived in the area where the house currently sits. There have also been signs of a sweat lodge where Native Americans performed rituals. An ancient tribal burial ground is thought to be under the house.
There have been stories of boys fishing in Salado Creek being chased away by what appear to be Native American ghosts. Some people have said they smell smoke and hear a light drum sound.
On September 18, 1842, General Adrian Wall, Sam Houston, and his men massacred more than 60 Mexican soldiers during the bloody Battle of Salado. Their bodies were left to rot where they fell. Only one Texan lost his life during the battle.
There was a reported sighting of what appeared to be a skirmish between the two armies, almost like a reenactment.
There have been sightings of a ghostly Confederate soldier near the gazebo in front of Victoria's Black Swan Inn.
The sound of a bugle playing can be heard sometimes.
In 1936, the property was designated as a historic site by the state of Texas during the 1936 centennial celebration.
The Prescott House was built after the Civil War. Original owners Sebastian and Heinrich Betsy Ripstein settled the land in 1867. The San Antonio Conservation Society shows that they built a stone house barn and a dairy barn as well. They lived in the home with their 5 children, Gustav, Henrietta, Bertha or Betty, Ida, and Albert.
According to psychics at EVP Audio, Gustav is believed to be one of the 3 spirits that haunts the dairy barn. He appears as a fully formed apparition wearing what looks to be a tank top. He has been seen staring at people through a window by a thermal imaging camera and is known to make loud noises.
Another spirit believed to haunt the barn is that of Heinrich Henry Mahler, who along with his family purchased the property in January 1887. He ran a prize dairy farm and added a milking barn to the property, renaming it Bluebonnet Dairy. The Mahlers operated the dairy farm until the mid-1930s. It is believed that he haunts the barn because he loved it so much.
After his wife Maria passed away, he followed her 2 years later from what is believed to be grief. Henry will venture into the house as well as the milking barn. His daughter Sarah, or Susie, pulls pranks on people in a building located behind the Black Swan.
There is another spirit, believed to be that of a big burly German man, who also haunts the barn. Although no one is quite sure who he is believed to be Sebastian Ripstein.
None of these spirits are particularly friendly. They are aggressive towards anyone, but most especially to the men. EVPs have been captured of a deep voice telling people to get out.
In the front yard of the house there seems to be the spirit of a child, a little girl whom many believe is Sarah Mahler, Henry's daughter. She likes to play and jump on mattresses. Sebastian can also be found in the home.
After both Henry and Maria passed, their son Daniel and his wife lived on the property, which included 237 acres of land. They sold the house and the surrounding land to a pair of married sisters in 1941.
The sisters, Catherine Holbrook and Mary Woods, along with their husbands, purchased the property and called the house White Gables. They conducted extensive remodeling, adding 2 wings to enlarge the mansion to accommodate the 2 families. A second house was built in 1901, but it burnt down a little while later.
Jolene Woods, one of their children, and her husband Hall Park Street Jr. inherited the house in 1952. After the deaths of Mr. and Mrs. Holbrook as well as Mr. Woods, Mrs. Woods lived in the house with her daughter and son-in-law. During this time, a second story was added to the main house.
Jolene died of breast cancer in 1959. Park Jr. was found dead in 1965, being hung by a necktie with his hands tied behind his back. Despite that, his death was ruled a suicide. They were survived by their daughters, Jolene Jingles, who was only 19 at the time, and their son Hall Park Street III, of whom there are no records.
Hall's supposed suicide has been a topic of some controversy. A psychic consultant with the Sci-Fi Channel show Sightings is said to have communicated with the former resident. He believes that Hall Park Street was murdered in the South Wing closet and moved to another location, where it was made to look like a suicide. It is said that Street was killed for the treasure that he still guards in the South Wing, although some believe that Henry's ghost drove Park to commit suicide.
Psychics have identified the elderly Mrs. Woods in a small bedroom in the South Wing. She is seen as a young spirit sitting on the bed. She spent several years confined to this room before being placed in a nursing home. Although her final resting place was in one of the downstairs bedrooms, it is in this small room in the South Wing that many experience an overwhelmingly oppressive heaviness and a feeling of deep sadness.
The most unnerving presence at the property is that of a man who has been spotted stalking angrily all over the house. Rumor has it that he is the ghost of Hall Park Street. Is he perhaps looking for his beloved wife Jolene, whose spirit is also said to haunt the inn after tragedy struck her at the tender age of 38 when she died of cancer?
A female specter, dressed in a luxurious white gown with a beaded jeweled medallion headpiece complete with a feather holding her dark hair back, roams the property aimlessly, especially around the gazebo. She is believed to be Jolene, but she never finds her beloved Hall.
The Maharons bought the property from Hall III and Jingles in 1973, renaming it the Maharon House. They remodeled it to include a large kitchen, dining areas, and reception areas.
After renovations, they sold the property again. It changed hands a few more times before finding the current owner, Joanne. She renamed it Victoria's Black Swan Inn after one of William Shakespeare's favorite pubs. The house is Joanne's private residence for her and her loved ones.
Not only has the house been featured on multiple paranormal television specials and investigations, but famous musicians such as George Strait have performed and filmed here. Numerous artists, filmmakers, and photographers have worked on the property.
While setting up for an event in 2015, there were several strange unexplained occurrences. One person was bitten and bruised on the inner thigh by an unseen toddler through a long, heavy dress. Another person was pinched by a little girl and boy ghost. Objects were randomly relocated throughout the woods when no one was around.
It continues to be a venue for weddings, paranormal investigations, historic tours, and several other types of social events throughout the year, including the Masquerade Ball in October. We can only hope to one day attend this ghostly event.
Number 4. The Plaza Theater.
The Plaza Theater is a well-known historical landmark in El Paso, Texas. Built in 1930 and in operation until the 1980s. After a period of abandonment, it was renovated and reopened in 2006.
A National Historic Building of Significance, this grand theater features 2 separate halls, the larger Kendall Kid Performance Hall with seating for 2,050 guests, and the smaller 200-seat Philanthropy Theater. They host Broadway productions, musical concerts, individual performances, and the annual Plaza Classic Film Festival.
Before the Plaza Theater was constructed, there had been a large produce warehouse in its place. In February of 1927, owners of the warehouse, Bernard and Ben Schusker, sold the property to Louis Dent, whose intentions were to do something good for the city of El Paso. To quote an interview he gave to the El Paso Times, "El Paso has been good to me, and I am going to put something everybody will be proud of."
Construction of the Plaza Theater began in 1929. Designed by prolific Dallas architect W. Scott Dunn, who is credited with more than 30 theaters in Texas and Oklahoma, today the Plaza is recognized as his surviving masterpiece. It was designed as a modern film house in a Spanish colonial revival style. Completed in 1930, it was advertised as the largest theater of its kind between Dallas and Los Angeles.
The Plaza opened with its first show, a movie called Follow Through, on September 12, 1930, to a crowd of 2,410 people. Its size, elaborate decor, and technical innovations set it apart from the other theaters in El Paso. It featured an atmospheric ceiling complete with twinkling stars, which were astronomically correct, and projections of lazy floating clouds.
It was also the first public theater in the United States to feature air conditioning. Being in El Paso, I'm sure that was greatly appreciated.
The Plaza showed countless historical productions, including the classic Gone with the Wind, although certain racial laws in place at the time made them split the showing in two.
By the 1950s, patronage began to decline due to the rise of television and proximity to neighborhoods. It was simply too far from downtown to maintain the same draw. The popularity of drive-ins during the 1940s also provided competition. By the early 1970s, the Plaza Theater had fallen into disrepair and was sold. Many of its impressive amenities, including furnishings, artwork, and the mighty Wurlitzer organ, originally costing $60,000 in 1930, were auctioned off. The Dipp family saved it from complete demolition in 1973.
In 1985, the state of Texas declared the Plaza Theater to be a historical landmark. However, that didn't stop the doors from closing in 1989. After closing, the decision was made to demolish the Plaza Theater to make way for a parking lot. A swell of community support triggered the El Paso Community Foundation to begin negotiations to raise the required $9 million to save the Plaza Theater from demolition once more. With only 6 days to raise the funds, things seemed dire for this historic site.
Actress Rita Moreno swooped in on the day before the deadline. It was announced that evening that the money had been raised. After the El Paso Community Foundation repaired the roof, the Plaza Theater was donated to the city of El Paso in 1990.
In 2000, a volunteer steering community assembled by the El Paso Community Foundation began to assess the viability of restoring the Plaza Theater. Finding it feasible, they began an extensive survey of El Paso's local performing arts community. Finding the market and desire for the restoration project, the City of El Paso formally approved a partnership with the El Paso Community Foundation to restore the plaza to its original splendor, including a replacement for the mighty organ. The City of El Paso agreed to fund the remaining cost of restoration.
At nearly $38 million, the Plaza Theater reopened on March 17, 2006, to a weekend of sold-out performances of Riverdance. The main theater house has a 10-story stage capable of handling large Broadway shows. The smaller hall is known as the Children's Theater, but also contains a rooftop garden, meeting facilities, and a privately managed restaurant.
The El Paso Community Foundation continues to search for the original artwork and furnishings from this historic site.
The Plaza Theater has been toured by many paranormal investigation teams, and not one has left empty-handed. The various sightings include
lights turning on and off,
an elderly man smoking a cigarette,
a shadowy man in black,
an eerie red-orange orb of light has been seen floating through the mezzanine,
and the spirit of a little girl who can be heard laughing and playing with what sounds like a bouncing ball in the grand lobby.
There is no doubt that you're in for a thrilling show at the Plaza Theater in El Paso, Texas.
Number 3. Yorktown Memorial Hospital.
The Yorktown Memorial Hospital was built in 1951 and opened the following year. Named in memory of those from Yorktown who fought and died in World War II and run by the Felican Sisters of the Roman Catholic Church, its doors stayed open until 1986. A competing hospital was built a few miles away in Cuero, Texas, effectively putting the Yorktown Memorial Hospital out of business.
Under the care of the Felican Sisters, the hospital is said to have lost over 500 patients in 6 years. A staggering number of fatalities for a hospital the size of Yorktown and in such a short period of time. It is no wonder it is said to be plagued by restless spirits that still wander the halls today.
After the doors closed in 1986, they were reopened in 1988 as a drug rehabilitation center until its complete shutdown in 1992. To this day, the Yorktown Memorial Hospital and the people who venture inside have been tormented by the spirits of this desolate building.
Rumors abound about the number of people who died in the hospital, but it is said to be around 2,000. No one knows the true number of lives lost to this facility.
The building itself is made up of about 30,000 square foot, which includes a basement and 2 wings on either side of the main hall. The second floor is strictly living quarters for those who worked at the facility.
Speaking of employees, when it was a rehab facility, it was incredibly difficult to find and keep staff. This led to its eventual closure as those under their care could not be controlled by the few people working there. One of those employees was Dr. Nowierski.
Dr. Nowierski was one of the main medical professionals to work at the facility. By the time of his retirement, he held the oldest medical license in Texas. Unfortunately, this didn't mean patients were safe under his watch or hand.
He became known for his fatal mistakes during operations, including the accidental slitting of a patient's throat during a thyroid operation. Oh, that's horrible.
One of the most active, well-known, and least frightening spirits is of a little girl called Stacy. In life, her favorite book was The Pokey Little Puppy, and she had the nuns read it to her often. According to some, the book was actually a gift given to her by none other than Dr. Nowierski, with a note addressed to her from him on the inside.
In the afterlife, Stacy frequents several specific areas of the hospital. She frequents her old room on the first floor, as well as the basement hallways where you can hear her playing. Since she loves story time, she can be enticed by reading her favorite book aloud in the library. She will also play ball with you if you decide to ask.
The Felican sisters are also rumored to still roam the halls. However, they are not nearly as friendly as Stacy. People who have toured the hospital claim that the nuns can be violent. The attacks have included being choked, scratched, or rushed at. They seem to lash out against anyone with tattoos. One sister has been seen in different areas around the hospital, and photos of her in her habit have been caught as well.
A man by the name of Doug Richards is thought to be among the spirits still residing in the hospital. All that is really known about Doug is that he was a heavy equipment mechanic who somehow died on the property in 1973. He's a very tall spirit that roams the halls in a white t-shirt and blue jeans.
When the building was still operational as a rehabilitation facility, tragedy befell a man known as TJ. He came to the back door seeking help one night, but no one would answer the door. It's unknown why. Perhaps the bell stopped working, or the staff was unresponsive. Perhaps he never made it to the bell. Either way, his body was found the next morning on the steps, having never received the treatment he needed. His apparition can still be seen wandering the halls near the back door.
A tragic and violent event took place on the grounds that still leaves its mark today. Literally, there is some debate about the actual story behind the incident.
Some say there was a love triangle between a female employee, a co-worker, and a patient.
Others say it was a nurse and two patients. In both cases, however, the woman was caught in the boiler room with one lover by the other. Her scorned lover snapped and stabbed her several times, killing her. The man she was with managed to take the knife from the attacker and turn it on him, killing him. Blood splatter still stains the walls today.
There are a number of other paranormal happenings throughout the grounds, from orbs to shadow men. Nearly everything has been captured by investigators at this haunted location.
Some fantastic EVP recordings taken here that yield clear voices.
Don't forget to look in every room. See, this is one of the... Don't forget to look in every room.
Shadows frequent the halls in both the emergency and operating areas.
Screams can be heard coming from the labor and delivery ward. Ooh.
The spookiest thing to witness is the battery-operated dolls in one of the bedrooms. They have been caught on camera responding to requests from investigators to laugh and converse with them. Some believe that the dolls are Stacy's or other child spirits' way of communicating with the living.
Travel Channel's Ghost Adventures has investigated this location and caught a lot of chilling things on camera. We recommend you check out the full episode of Season 4, Episode 21 of Ghost Adventures for the full details.
They captured clear and terrifying EVP recordings, disembodied moaning and shuffling, as well as the bottom half of a figure using an infrared still camera.
The Yorktown Memorial Hospital is without a doubt one of the most haunted places in the U.S., and Texas is lucky enough to have it. With roughly 2,000 recorded deaths on the property, it's no wonder this location is a hotbed of paranormal activity.
Watch yourself should you venture anywhere near Yorktown Memorial Hospital in Texas. Number 2. The U.S.S. Lexington. Hauntingly referred to as the Blue Ghost, the U.S.S. Lexington is a decommissioned World War II aircraft carrier stationed in Corpus Christi, Texas. While most naval vessels of its time were covered in what was called a dazzle camouflage, a complex pattern of geometric shapes in contrasting colors meant to confuse enemy ships, the U.S.S. Lexington was commissioned for battle before it could be painted, so it appears more blue.
It was reported at least 4 times and confirmed at least once that the U.S.S. Lexington had been sunk. The first vessel with the same name was sunk in the Coral Sea. World War II enemy propaganda broadcast nicknamed her the Blue Ghost because she kept coming back.
In 1980, the U.S.S. Lexington became the first aircraft carrier in U.S. naval history to have women stationed as crew members.
In 1992, she became a permanent Texas resident after being decommissioned. It is now known as the U.S.S. Lexington Museum on the bay and displays a massive amount of U.S. naval history. From the site of an attack by a plane during World War II to being the site of a few scenes from the film Pearl Harbor, there is no shortage of things to learn on this aircraft carrier.
In fact, if you head on down to the engine room, you might just catch a lecture on how turbines work from a sailor in uniform, just before he vanishes into thin air.
If you lose your way in the belly of the ship, never fear, there is always a ghostly sailor to lead you back to the deck.
Director of Operations Charles Rusty Russell claims that there are hundreds of sightings and reports of supernatural activity every year. In fact, he has his own odd experiences. The one he loves best is about his pen caps.
To quote, "I always use a ballpoint pen, and over the course of a few weeks, I lost about 6 pen caps. The day I lost the 6th pen cap, I turned over my office looking for them. My office was spotless by the time I was through, and I never found them. It wasn't until I returned to the office the next morning that I found all 6 pen caps lying side by side right in front of my keyboard." End quote. Oh, you poor fella, I'd be scared to death.
No one has ever been hurt by the spirits, as they seem to be more playful and helpful than menacing. The museum's education coordinator, Renee Moreta, said that officials have heard from security officers who have heard running in the hangar bay around 3 a.m.
The damage control officer said he didn't see anything on the security cameras and went to see what the noise was coming from. That was when he witnessed a shadow figure running in chaos. The officer never came back.
A volunteer and paranormal tour guide at the Lexington, Bill Miller, said that he believes what they saw were the sailors running for cover after a torpedo attack hit the ship in Hangar Bay 3.
Quote, "They constantly do the same thing over and over again, maintaining the ship. This was their home, and they don't want to go anywhere else."
If you're looking for a frightfully good time, the U.S.S. Lexington hosts its own haunted tour in October. You can tour over 80 compartments, including spaces that aren't generally open to the public. Keep your wits about you and a cool head should you decide to spend some time in the U.S.S. Lexington Museum on the Bay.
Number 1 is one that cannot be overlooked, the Hotel Galvez in Galveston, Texas. Plans for the construction of the Hotel Galvez in Galveston, Texas began in 1998. However, those plans were fast-tracked after the hurricane of 1900 devastated the island in an effort to draw tourists back to the area. Finished in 1911 with a combination of Mission and Spanish Revival styles and boasting 226 guest rooms, the hotel cost right at $1 million. It stands where the Beach Hotel, Electris Pavilion, and Pagoda Bathhouse once stood.
On October 3, 1940, William Lewis Moody Jr. purchased the Grand Hotel. During World War II, the hotel was occupied by the U.S. Coast Guard for 2 years and rooms were not rented to tourists. The Galvez's importance to the local economy was restored after the war, particularly during the late 1940s and early 50s when gambling became popular in Galveston. However, when the illegal gambling industry was shut down in the mid-1950s by the Texas Rangers, the local economy became depressed and the Hotel Galvez began to deteriorate.
Luckily, this magnificent place has been refurbished and renovated a few times by its various owners. In 1989, it became a member of the Marriott franchise, but by 1996 had become part of the Wyndham Hotel family.
Nicknamed the Playground of the Southwest by its wealthy patrons, the Hotel Galvez has been a vacation spot for many celebrities. Jimmy Stewart, Frank Sinatra, Howard Hughes, and even President Franklin D. Roosevelt all stayed under her roof. Boasting gorgeous rooms, pool and hot tub areas, as well as cabanas and a seawall view, it's easy to see why.
This hotel is special as they embrace their haunted history with the addition of ghost tours as well as historical information on the hotel's app.
Room 501 is the most well-known haunted room in the hotel. Local legend says that a woman by the name of Audra was staying in that room while her fiancé was out to sea. Upon finding out his ship had sunk, she took her own life. She is now doomed to wander the halls of the Hotel Galvez, forever waiting for her beloved.
Before the storm of 1900, an orphanage by the name of St. Mary's Asylum stood near the grounds. Operated by the Sisters of Charity, it was completely destroyed in the storm. 90 children and 10 sisters were killed in the chaos. The sisters had attempted to save as many children as possible by tying themselves and the children together by the waist. However, it's believed that this ultimately led to their demise. Several children and one sister were found on the grounds and were rumored to be buried on the spot. The nun's spirit is referred to as Sister Catherine.
A little girl in 1900-era clothing is often seen around the hotel. She has been reported in the hotel lobby, near the gift shop, on the staircase, and on multiple floors of the hotel. She was even seen in the basement by a construction crew as they were doing renovations. The crew reported that a little girl was playing in the construction site to the front desk as they were concerned for her safety. However, she was never found. Phantom children can be heard throughout the hotel, but most specifically on the 3rd floor. Guests report the sounds of children running and laughing through the halls late at night. The children have been said to be quite the tricksters. They play with the piano bench in the lobby, knock over drink trays, and call out to female guests they identify as mommy. These phantom children are believed to be the spirits of the children buried on the property after the storm of 1900.
The 1st floor bathroom near the music hall is rumored to be haunted by a male spirit. A female guest was having a late night swim when she decided to go inside and use the restroom. As she went into the stall, all of the lights went out and loud footsteps echoed through the room. A man's heavy breathing filled the air, and after a moment of terror, she heard a man's voice saying, "Get out!" Running in panic, she called security, who claimed that according to security camera footage, no one had followed her in or out of the restroom.
At the end of a downstairs hallway hangs a portrait of Bernardo de Galvez, a Spanish military leader who aided the American colonies during the Revolutionary War and is credited as the namesake of Galveston Island. Legend has it that his portrait is haunted. People report that the eyes will follow you as you walk by, or feeling uneasy and chilled when being near it. Many tourists come to take photos of the infamous portrait. However, none come outright unless you have asked for his permission.
It is clear that this hotel entertains more than just your average guest.
Be sure you're ready before you dare to spend the night at the Hotel Galvez. And you can't talk about haunted places in Texas without mentioning the Alamo.
Originally constructed by Spanish settlers in 1718 and originally named the Mission San Antonio de Valero, named for St. Anthony of Padua. They also established the nearby military garrison of San Antonio de Bejar, which soon became the center of the settlement San Fernando de Bejar, eventually becoming what is now known as San Antonio, Texas.
The missions housed the missionaries and their Native American converts for some 70 years until 1793.
Spanish military troops were stationed in the abandoned chapel of the former mission in the early 1800s. Because it stood in a grove of cottonwood trees, the soldiers called the fort El Alamo after the Spanish word for cottonwood.
The fort changed military hands a couple of times during and after Mexico's War for Independence from Spain in the early 1820s, first Spanish, then rebel, and later belonging to Mexico.
In the summer of 1821, Stephen F. Austin arrived in San Antonio along with some 300 U.S. families that the Spanish government had allowed to settle in Texas. Revolution came by the mid-1830s, when the migration of U.S. citizens to Texas increased over the next decade.
In December 1835, a group of Texas volunteers led by George Collingsworth and Benjamin Milam overwhelmed the Mexican forces and captured the fort.
By mid-February 1836, Colonel James Bowie
And Lieutenant Colonel William B. Travis had taken command of the Texan forces in San Antonio, though Sam Houston, the newly appointed commander-in-chief of the Texan forces, argued that San Antonio should be abandoned as there weren't enough troops to defend it.
Despite their numbers being less than 200, even with later reinforcements, the defenders of the Alamo prepared to defend her to the end.
On February 23rd, Mexican forces led by General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, and numbered somewhere between 1,800 and 6,000 depending on source, laid siege to the Alamo.
Texas forces led by Bowie and Travis, and including Davy Crockett, stood their ground. Legend has it that in the last days of the battle, as the Alamo was surrounded by enemy troops, Travis received word to surrender or all of his men would be killed. Knowing this, he gathered his men, took out his sword, and drew a line in the sand.
He asked his men to choose their fate: surrender and leave the Alamo, or cross the line and join him in defending her to the death. All but one Texan soldier crossed the line and faced their doom.
On March 6, Santa Anna's troops breached the outer walls of the Alamo. He ordered his men to take no prisoners, and only a small handful of Texans were spared. Among them was Susanna Dickinson and her infant daughter, Angelina. Her husband, Captain Dickinson, was killed.
Santa Anna used them as a message for Sam Houston by sending them to him in Gonzales.
A warning that a similar fate awaited all Texans who continued to revolt.
On April 21, 1836, Sam Houston and some 800 Texans defeated Santa Anna's force of 1,500 men at San Jacinto, near present-day Houston. The battle cry of "Remember the Alamo" rang out through the air as they attacked.
Santa Anna was taken prisoner and the terms of Texas independence were set, thus ending the war. The following May, Mexican troops were ordered to withdraw and demolish the Alamo as they left. By June, Santa Anna was exiled.
The Alamo was used for storage of both goods and troops until around 1883, when the state of Texas purchased the Alamo and later the property rights to all the surrounding grounds. The Daughters of the Republic of Texas, a women's organization that included descendants of the earliest Texas residents, has managed the conservation of the Alamo since 1905.
It is no wonder why so many spirits linger on the grounds of this historic fort. You can almost hear the pinging of bullets and the cry of soldiers charging into battle.
It's even said that as the Mexican troops came back to burn the Alamo down after the battle, ghostly warriors stood guard on the walls of the fort and brought the enemy troops to their knees.
Many have reported spirits wandering around the fort or troops marching up and down the path out front.
They tried to use the site as a jailhouse, but that didn't quite work out. Between 1894 and 1897, the local newspaper, the San Antonio Express-News, published a series of articles highlighting paranormal events occurring at the Alamo.
Ghostly guards marching along the rooftops.
Dark figures roaming the corridors at night.
The distinct sound of moaning and agony awoke the staff and prisoners alike.
Soon, the guards refused to be on patrol at night, forcing the prison to relocate.
It is said that even now, construction workers doing projects around the Alamo will still pull up bits of skull or bone from the dead.
One of the most commonly spotted ghosts is that of a blonde-haired boy, most often seen in the upstairs left window, which is now part of the Alamo gift shop. He is believed to be the spirit of a little boy who was evacuated during the siege of the Alamo. Though he survived, his parents did not, so he returns to the last place he was with them. He is most active during February.
It isn't just Texans that linger in the halls of the Alamo. Along the outer walls of the fort, there is what appears to be a Mexican soldier, his hands always clasped behind his back as he paces the grounds outside. His chin tilted down as he sadly shakes his head.
He is believed to be General Manuel Fernandez de Castrillon, one of Santa Anna's commanders who refused to lay siege to the Alamo. Just before the end of the battle, 6 men were brought to him to surrender. He offered the men his protection, but Santa Anna refused this act of truce and ordered the Texans executed. When Castrillon refused, Santa Anna murdered them himself, hacking them to death with his saber.
A man and child are often seen on the rooftop just after sunrise, before he wraps his arms around the child and jumps from the roof.
Today, people report feelings of intense sadness and sorrow when inside the Alamo. It's safe to say that the spirits of all those who met their end at this historic fort are restless and very active.
Take a moment to feel the cold chill in the air at this somber fort, and don't forget to remember the Alamo.
Thanks for watching.
If you like what you see, please remember to hit that like and subscribe button.
Also, ring that notification bell for more content from us here at Gals and Ghosts.